Ravens will kick off the second round of in-person interviews for the head coach position tomorrow. They are interviewing Anthony Weaver in person tomorrow. The Ravens interviewed their 16th candidate today. We'll discuss who that was. The Bills fired Sean McDermott after Josh Allen had 4 turnovers in the playoffs. Stefanski goes to the Falcons. Mike Macdonald and the Seahawks advance to the NFC Championship, which means that the Ravens will have to wait to interview Kubiak if that is one of the finalists. We'll go over all of the Ravens coaching updates and discuss some options further in this episode of the Flock Rundown.
Ravens Flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be.
Motionless brainwaves attempt to swim their way to sense, can't tame the untamed.
What's up, Ravens fans? My name is Ryan, and welcome back to another episode of the Flock Rundown. So the Ravens had their 16th Zoom interview today, and that was Jaguars defensive coordinator Anthony Campanelli. And this should conclude the first round of interviews because the Ravens are officially bringing in Anthony Weaver tomorrow for an in-person interview, which kicks off the second round. You know, up to this point, the Ravens had 16 Zoom interviews with a variety of coaches with some experience, a lot of experience, no experience, offensive coaches, defensive coaches. They were interviewing a lot of different candidates, and now it is going to be very interesting to see who is involved in this second round in-person interviews, and Anthony Weaver is confirmed. So they will start with Anthony Weaver, but I would imagine there are another 3 or 4 guys. Steve Bisciotti said he'd be a part of the final 4 or 5 guys. Anthony Weaver is a part of that final 4 or 5 guys. I would imagine Steve Bisciotti and hopefully Lamar Jackson are flying up to Baltimore and are a part of these in-person interviews starting tomorrow, but we'll see. To be honest, I'm trusting that Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome and the Ravens organization is going to make the best decision and the best hire, but personally, I don't think it's Anthony Weaver, and it's nothing against Anthony Weaver. I actually think he would be a great leader. I think he could be that CEO type and also bring some defensive presence as well, but we didn't even pick him for the D coordinator job. So I don't know if, they're fully believing in his defensive mind. It's not, to me, like a Jesse Minter type of hire where he's going to bring an edge to the defense. I mean, he simplifies things. He is aggressive. He's very smart defensive coordinator, and I think that brings an edge to you. Or, on the offensive side of the ball, a guy like Kubiak, who I really want, he's bringing a lot of intelligence to the game and to the team. So I'm not saying that Anthony Weaver doesn't bring any of that, but I do think if we went in the direction of Anthony Weaver as head coach, it's definitely for the energy, the leadership, the ability to connect and inspire. Because listening to him talk, I mean, he's an impressive guy, man. There's no doubt about it. So I'm not saying that he wouldn't be a good head coach. He's just further down on my list of wants because I really want a genius mind coming in here and taking this team to another level. Playoff football is here. There's some banger matchups on deck this week, and this year I've teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook to bring you guys an incredible offer. New customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's right, new customers turn $5 into $300 if your bet wins. Paid in bonus bets, the crown is yours. Stay in on the action and use your bonus bets on DraftKings same game parlays for a shot and an even bigger payout. So make sure when you're signing up to use my promo code TFR. Another guy that the Ravens were set to bring back this week for an in-person interview is Kevin Stefanski, but he got the job with Atlanta over the weekend. And that's another wrinkle in all this, is if the Ravens do want a guy or they're eyeing up a guy, other teams are going to start acting, so it'll be really telling how aggressive the Ravens are. If they are very patient, then they're waiting for a guy like Kubiak potentially. But if they are starting to line up 4 or 5 interviews this week and you're getting reports that they have a favorite and whatnot, then they're probably not going to wait. I think it's smart to wait, though, honestly. There's a lot of potential candidates that the Ravens have interviewed already that are still playing in these championship games. You have the Broncos coordinators in Vance Joseph and Davis Webb, and then you have the Rams coordinators in Chris Shula and Nate Scheelhaus, and then you have Clint Kubiak, who's still coaching Seattle. So you got to wait for this week to play out. You are not allowed to interview these guys in person until next week when they have a bye week before the Super Bowl or they're eliminated. So the Ravens will be able to get a lot of this work done next week, no doubt, and then they can hire a guy after the Super Bowl if they're in the Super Bowl. Seattle did that with Mike Macdonald. They waited until the Ravens were done the AFC Championship game. They waited until after the Super Bowl to sign Mike Macdonald. So the Ravens could be very patient here and still get their guy. But there's a lot of competition. I mean, the Bills fired their head coach today as well. That is definitely a desired destination. I still think Baltimore's a more attractive destination, but I get it. I'm not saying Buffalo's an unattractive destination. So a lot of head coaches, especially offensive coaches, might want to go there and work with Allen. But I also think that you would be just as inspired to come work with Lamar Jackson, if not more. I really believe Lamar can do more, but maybe I'm biased because I'm a Ravens fan. But I just think that, the narrative has been uneven. People aren't as hard on Josh Allen as they are Lamar Jackson, but with a really genius head coach coming in here, or just offensive mind in general, like a Clint Kubiak, or if we don't go that direction, maybe even bringing in a Mike McDaniel, man, as offensive coordinator. I would love that option. Just getting one of those really smart minds with Lamar Jackson, I think you're going to see an entirely different level, and the narrative should change back to, hey, man, this is the best player on the planet, and it's not even close. And congrats to Mike Macdonald, the Seattle Seahawks, Clint Kubiak. I mean, they are balling, man. They dominated the Niners this weekend and look like the team that wanted it more. They're obviously a lot more healthy, but they're also very well coached, and they are executing and playing at a very high level. And the Rams game is going to be a fun watch, but I would not be shocked if Seattle goes and gets a Super Bowl this year, man. And, it does. I see a lot of Ravens fans is like, oh, man, we messed up so bad not keeping Mike Macdonald. We all knew it. We were all talking about it. That is true. Like, the fan base saw it. I think probably the organization saw it. But we can't forget that the Ravens had one of their best seasons that year that he left. The Ravens were the number 1 seed. They were hosting an AFC championship in Baltimore. They were so close, like knocking on the door of a Super Bowl. And that is a weird time to just move on from your head coach. We were maybe having a couple struggling years before that where it would have made sense. But that year was the best year. That was like the leap forward year. Outside of the Super Bowl year that we won, I mean, that was one of the best seasons that the Ravens had. So it'd be weird to move on and be like, hey, Harbaugh, you're out, even though we just leaped and had the best year in a long time. So it was awful timing, because I think if Mike Macdonald was on the staff now or even last year, it would have been a no-brainer. But the fact that it was right after that AFC championship, like, obviously in hindsight, it's a mistake. And even during it, we were like, hey, this would be the right move, but it's such a bold move. It's almost a move that doesn't even make sense in the moment. But looking back, it makes so much sense. And look at what Seattle's doing and how much success they're having. But honestly, I'm excited for this next hire. It doesn't mean that the Ravens can't go get somebody that is great. You know what I mean? And I think they're going to do their due diligence and bring in the right guy. So whoever it ends up being is going to be exciting. And that final search starts tomorrow with Anthony Weaver. He is kicking off the final 4 or 5 or 6 or however many guys they bring in person, but he's one of them. And yesterday, the Ravens interviewed Robert Saleh, who's another interesting name on this list, but he is doing an in-person interview with the Titans. So it kind of goes back to my point where it's like, if the Ravens do want a guy, you're going to see them get pretty aggressive pretty quickly here, because there are 10 head coach vacancies. And I know Baltimore is at the top of that list. Maybe some people are going to debate Buffalo or Pittsburgh or whatever, but Baltimore's, top 2 up there in available spots to land. But it's still competition. If we're not giving a guy the ultimate confidence, like, hey, you might be our head coach or we do want you, he might just go to Tennessee or Atlanta or, whatever. And so Atlanta got their coach. They got Kevin Stefanski, which I don't mind at all. He wasn't at the top of my list either, so I'm fine with that. John Harbaugh obviously went to New York right away, just kick it off. And then now you have 8 more that are still searching. That includes Pittsburgh, who is interviewing with Brian Flores tomorrow in person. And then you have Buffalo now that has a head coach vacancy. They are behind the 8 ball a little bit. I think the Ravens have a pretty big edge because they've already completed 16 Zoom interviews before the Bills have even started their search. But maybe they don't even want the same guy. Maybe both teams are kind of looking for different things. There's a ton of candidates out there, a very balanced amount of candidates too. You got a lot of good offensive minds, a lot of good defensive minds. I think some of the more leaders and vocal leaders are probably on the defensive side of the ball, but regardless, there's so many options. Right now, Jesse Minter is the betting favorite for the Ravens, but Jesse Minter is also the betting favorite for most teams, which is kind of weird. So I think that just kind of means that he's one of the most desired head coaches on the market, and he's got a little Mike Macdonald in him. I know he came from the Harbaugh umbrella and has had, experience in the Ravens organization, so it's not a completely different direction, but neither is Mike Macdonald, and we all wanted him. He's completely from the Harbaugh tree. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative. It doesn't mean that they don't know ball. They clearly know ball. And I've been watching a lot of videos on Jesse Minter and stuff, and he's able to really simplify the way he teaches it, which I think helps a ton, because the Ravens were struggling with a lot of miscommunication and just not gelling and playing together. And that's not Ravens defense at all. That is the exact opposite of that. So if Jesse Minter can bring simplicity and cohesion, I think the execution will go through the roof, and the Ravens will have a consistently good defense in Baltimore again. With a guy like Jesse Minter as the head coach, we would just have to go out and nail the offensive coordinator spot. And then also a guy like Clint Kubiak is still extremely interesting to me. His brother's actually getting a head coach interview as well, but I think Clint Kubiak, what he's doing in Seattle right now, is so impressive, man. I can't imagine him with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers, and I just really think that he would bring a lot of offensive success for a long time in Baltimore, man. So right now, I think Kubiak and Minter, and then maybe Robert Saleh is still an option. I know we interviewed him. The Titans are interviewing him in person, so I'd be curious if the Ravens are going to bring him back. But that's a name that does intrigue me, especially his relationship with Mike McDaniel. I'm still excited about a Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel combo, but they're not quite at the very top of my list. I'm still leaning towards Kubiak, and then Minter, I think, has moved into my second spot. So these are kind of my top three choices right now. But like I said before, the Ravens are the one interviewing these guys. We're just kind of observing from a distance. So we've got to put a little bit of trust in Steve Bisciotti and Eric DeCosta and their decision to bring in the right guy. They're getting a fresh reset. They know how important this decision is. They know how big of a deal this is to the next decade of Ravens football, or at least the next 5 years. So I think that they're going to make the right decision here and bring in the right guy, and they know way more than any of us know. So it's nice to have an opinion. It's cool. It's fun to talk about. We've been talking about it. I can't wait to see who they hire, but also putting a little bit of blind faith here, because, hearing Steve Bisciotti talking that press conference, the way it connected to a lot of Ravens fans and just NFL fans across the game, you got to trust a guy like that to go make the right hire then. So whoever they end up bringing, I think, will do a good job, and there'll be good reasoning behind it, but can't wait to find out, man. Starts tomorrow. Anthony Weaver kicks off the head coach in-person search. Let me know what you guys are thinking about everything that we talked about and the head coach search. Who's your top five? Who would you bring in for the in-person interviews? Also going live with Noah at 7 o'clock tonight, so can't wait to see you guys there and chop it up further about this. But let me know what's on your mind. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in to another episode of the Flock Rundown. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and I'll let the greatest linebacker in the history of the game take us out.
Ravens flock. The Flock Rundown is the place to be. My man Ryan has been a lifelong Ravens fan since he was born. So I'm telling you now, it's about to go down. Podcast, the Flock Rundown. Ravens, baby. Nothing gets better than waking up and wondering how high we can fly. Tune in.